One. And we are recording episode 668 with Mr. Steve Kirsch. For those that don't know you, I saw an interview with you with Mobeen Saeed and obviously with Dr. Malone and Brett Weinstein, which actually inspired me to get Dr. Malone on because I saw it was banned and I was like, hey, well, they're not going to ban me. I'm too small of a channel, famous last words. And Dr. McCullough recommended me to you, said you had to get this guy. I mean, emailed you, told you I was banned for a 30-second clip, and you're like, that's impressive. And so I guess we're both guilty of wrong think and we'll soon be thrown in gulags. But Mr. Kirsch, please tell my audience a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Sure. My name is Steve Kirsch. I'm an engineer at heart. I have a couple of degrees from MIT. I started 7 startup companies, invented the optical mouse, InfoSeek search engine, had a couple of startup companies that went to $1 billion market cap. And I was working on a startup when the pandemic hit and basically wanted to get back to work. So I looked around for what I could do to help. And the scientists that I had worked with over the years said I should take a look at early treatments because the government wasn't pursuing that. And I thought that was kind of strange because early treatments are the fastest, safest, cheapest way to end the pandemic. And so I ended up starting a COVID-19 early treatment fund. We funded fluvoxamine and other drugs. And that ended up being very successful. Fluvoxamine can reduce the chance of death by 12 times, but the NIH basically ignores it and tells doctors not to use it.
Yeah. And before we kind of get into the COVID stuff, I was going to say, you actually really worked on kind of like the early ARPANET or the ARPA centers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I worked with people like John Postel, who created the email protocol that everybody still uses under the covers. And Vint Cerf was there too. And Vint and I have remained friends since the very beginning.
And I think wasn't the guy that invented the internet or the guy that invented the emails the one that directed you on where you should go to school? So you figured that's
Vint Cerf said, oh, he thought I should go to MIT.
Yeah, well, that's about the best. And you coded you wrote the script for the email for the guy that invented the email. Is that correct?
Well, I wrote the email program.
Got it.
For the people who invented the ARPANET.
Okay. So, I mean, and I love Cold War history. I love everything DARPA, ARPA. I think it's insane. I love one of my favorite books. And by the way, this podcast just goes in all different directions. One of my favorite books is Raven Rock by Garrett Graff. It's all about the nuclear bunker systems, kind of started under FDR up through really Bush and then it's kind of just classified. But obviously the ARPANET was, well, we need the nodes to connect each other. I think it was LBJ that said, referring to the proposed, the DUC, the Deep Underground Command Center, which was basically going to be a carbon copy of the Pentagon, 3,500 feet below the Pentagon. He was like, well, it's a tomb. And what are we ruling from there? And I think it was Curtis LeMay's assistant, Tom Powers, who said, behind my desk and with my phones, I'm a lethal force, talking about Strategic Air Command. Without these things, I am just sitting at a desk with a telephone. And the entire, ARPANET, aside from kind of spearheading, giving birth to new forms of communication, was also how do we connect all these nuclear bunkers so they're not just tombs? And from one side, you can almost look at it as like the coup of if you wanted to truly be an immovable deep state, both literally and figuratively, being those kind of entrenched structures. It seemed to be the final puzzle piece. Okay, now we can just communicate underground. We're done. And I think you could also ironically argue that the birth of the internet has done more to break down the entrenched power structures hold on the world. So kind of taking that irony, I want to shift that to COVID, your the research into the early protocols where, as you said with Dr. Malone, why did you take, Mr. Kirsch, why did you take the Moderna vaccine? And no one was dying, and that's what the FDA told me. And so we're seeing these.
I thought nobody was dying. Let's put it that way.
We thought, yeah. So there are some parallels between, as you start to dig deeper and pull on these threads, it reveals a much bigger picture. It's not just incompetence. It's not just, well, we don't know if ivermectin's toxic. it's actually, we're starting to see it's beyond regulatory capture even. It seems to be a coordinated effort. Well, I guess regulatory capture. It seemed to be a complete coordinated effort to suppress any and all early treatment so that the only outcome is the vaccine. So, with that ramble, thank you for your patience with that. Where do you view us today, January 18th, 2022? How are we going to, if it was just, hey, ivermectin works and we all clean our hands and we go, oh, we did it. It seems to be so much larger. It seems to be a rot in the FDA, the CDC. And not only that, it's probably not a new rot. It's just now being exposed. Could you maybe touch on how we even begin to go at that?
No, the first step in solving any problem is to realize that you have a problem. And nobody has realized that that's in authority to do anything about it. And, of course, there are people who realize there's a problem, but they're in on it, right? They are part of the problem. So what we don't have is a president of the United States who is going to realize that we have a problem here and we clean up the mess. We don't have a Congress that recognizes that there's a problem here. In fact, they don't even think there's a problem with the vaccine. And, that's evidence in plain sight. They just don't want to look at it. They don't want to confront the evidence. So like I talked to a congressman who I've supported, and he said, oh, we'll talk to my staffer. So it took about 4 weeks for the staffer to get back to me. I gave the staffer all the information showing that unambiguously, if you look at the evidence objectively, that there's a huge problem here, that the vaccines are unsafe and are killing massive numbers of people. And the staffer told me, well, we disagree with you, Mr. Kirsch. And I said, well, could you at least tell me why? And she said, no, I'm too busy. I'll give you a call back in a couple of weeks. So a couple of weeks later, she says, well, I didn't really read anything that you sent, but it disagrees with the CDC. So therefore you're wrong. And that's the reason that you're incorrect, is because the CDC doesn't agree with you. So therefore, we're not interested in acting on your information because it's obviously wrong, since it disagrees with the CDC. And so that's the report back to the congressman to check into this is, well, I didn't read anything he says, but it doesn't agree with what the CDC says, and therefore it's wrong, and therefore you can ignore him. He's just a nutcase. And so it continues. And so when I talk about all of the experts that have verified that people who die after vaccination were likely caused by the vaccine, that doesn't seem to register. It's like, it's like talking to a wall. It's very strange. And I put together, I've got a very popular Substack, stevekirsch.substack.com. And I write articles, and I'll write maybe, sometimes it's an article a day. More often, lately, it's been like 5 or 6 articles a day. I'm like inundating people with this, but still my subscriber base keeps growing and growing every single day. And, some people say that I write the best Substack on the pandemic, which is gratifying, to see, but it's, it's coming from people who follow me. So
Sure.
It's a little bit biased. But I think I do a pretty good job. And I've got an article that I'll be publishing today that basically summarizes up the entire case. It says, look, here's the scientific case for the spike protein being dangerous, even when it's in the vaccine. Here's the case for the vaccines being dangerous. Here's the case for the vaccine having no effect. Here's the case for the mandates. It goes through everything, goes through masks, goes through everything. And you can't read that with an open mind and not be convinced that this is an unmitigated disaster. And yet I know, having been doing this for 6 months, I started pretty much in early May, when my eyes were open, because my friends because some friends had died or had been permanently injured by the vaccine. And, then I started looking into it, and I looked into the VAERS data and started looking into the science behind it and so forth. And we looked at the FOIA request, the biodistribution data from the Japanese government, and all this stuff. And so I gone on a podcast with Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. Brett Weinstein, and we disclosed what we had found in terms of the vaccine being dangerous. And a lot of people who watched that episode, they thanked us for it. And of course, not everyone saw that episode, but the Malone episode with Joe Rogan, 50 million people saw that one. So I think more people are starting to believe what I'm saying now. And when people get vaccine injured, surprisingly, some people can't figure it out. They can't, I got the vaccine yesterday and my cancer is now out of control 3 days later or a week later. This cancer that had been in remission for 10 years, and they just say, just a bad coincidence. But you see these bad coincidences are happening all over the place. I got a heart attack. I got a cardiac arrest. Happened a week after the vaccine. Or 3-year-old dies, 1 day after from cardiac arrest. Well, first of all, 3-year-olds don't die from cardiac arrest. And secondly, it doesn't happen 1 day after the vaccine. But people aren't connecting the dots here. It's like that New York Times reporter New York Times editor who died right after he got the vaccine. And in his obituary in the Times, they never talked about the vaccine at all. Like it's not even relevant. The guy got killed by the vaccine, and the New York Times, their own guy, their own editor, and the New York Times editor got killed by the vaccine. And there's not even a mention that the vaccine could have caused his death.
Do you think
it's really insane?
North Korea's got to be looking at this and going, this is some brainwashing. We thought we had it good over here.
Yeah. This is, you could give people this list of evidence. And I said, if you had asked me 6 months ago and said, hey, if somebody saw this evidence, how would they react to it? And I would say, 100% of the people would turn on the government. And then I talked to a psychologist last night, and I asked him, so people who believe in this stuff, if I showed them all of this and you worked with them for 4 hours to try to get them to see the objective evidence, what percentage of the people could you convince? This is a psychologist armed with evidence. Okay. Do you know what he said?
0.
Out of say 100 people, how many could he if he was one-on-one with 100 people to try to get them out to move them from where they are to reality?
20
out of 100.
That's my bet.
His answer was minuscule. He wasn't sure he could convince even one person. That was impressive to me, because I know that I've talked to doctors who have what we call red-pilled other doctors. It happens infrequently. I've heard of one story of that happening. Generally, the psychologist actually said it's actually better if you have a group of people, and you have people who are, there are the red pill people and the blue pill people, and the people in between. So he says it's helpful if you have the people in between, because they're moving over.
Yeah.
And the people on the blue pill, seeing those people go red pill, can actually make it much easier to sell them in a group setting and to change their mind when they're in a group and they see other people moving, because then the reality shifts. Otherwise, what happens is they just go deeper into their, belief system. And the more that you fight their belief system, the deeper they dig in their heels and be entrenched. It's almost like if I were to try to convince you that global warming is not real, and I actually have that, and suppose I have evidence to do so, that you would say, oh, you're first of all, you're a nutcase. I don't even want to talk to you. You won't even listen to it. And, and so now when people approach me and they say, hey, I don't think global warming's on the level, I'll say, okay, I'm open to hearing that, because, normally I would dismiss you as a crank, but I kind of learned my lesson from this. So even I, and I'm pretty open-minded on this stuff. When the vaccines evidence showed up on my doorstep saying, hey, these things are not as safe as you thought, I didn't go like, no, you must be wrong, you must be lying. I thought, okay, data point. And I got more data points. And after I got a few data points, it was impossible to not acknowledge those data points, because they were statistically impossible to happen if the CDC was telling the truth. And the more I learned, of course, the more I learned about the corruption at the CDC, the corruption at the FDA. And simple example, Maddie DeGarry, she's 12-year-old. She's injured in the Pfizer 12 to 15-year-old trial. And she's now on her way to being a quadriplegic, tragically. I talked to Janet Woodcock at the FDA, who's head of the FDA, and she said she would investigate, because it was reported as abdominal pain. It was not reported correctly in the trial. It was trial fraud in the most scrutinized trial of all time. How could they have allowed this fraud to happen with all eyes on the trial? Well, the answer is all eyes weren't on the trial. There was all sorts of mischief happening in the trial. And they basically, if people die, they look the other way. They say, oh, it's not related to the vaccine. And when people get injured, when people are paralyzed, oh, can't be vaccine related. It happened less than 24 hours after she got her shot. She's perfectly healthy. Less than 24 hours after she gets her shot, she can't walk. Now, that's deemed as not even want to investigate that. She's a quadriplegic now. This is what we're dealing with here. And they don't want to acknowledge it. And the mainstream media will not acknowledge this case either.
There's certainly a lot of psychological aspects to this. And, Dr. Matthias Desmet, the mass formation psychosis guy, after hearing Dr. McCullough talk about him, and then after hearing Dr. Malone talk about him, I reached out to him, and I had McCullough, Malone, and Desmet on last Tuesday, January 4th, and had him talk about it. And I'm looking at it from that angle. And then the other angles, I just look at, we don't even need to dive into wild speculation. I just go back and look at, I look at monopolies in the United States, just going back a century, 2 centuries. I look back at, early JP Morgan, not the corporation, the actual guy, right? He bought up newspapers in his immediate vicinity, control the narrative. It's a brilliant business move. So I look back at these things. I look back at the opioid epidemic. I look back at thalidomide, right? The flipper babies. So 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Lucky Strikes, or the food pyramid and the grains and the sugars. You can see so many times, even in my short life, 31 years old, just 13 years ago, with Pfizer paying out the $2.3 billion fine. So I look at these things, I look at the psychological aspects of it, and it doesn't take a whole lot of brain power to start connecting the strings to go, all right, well, like what would Occam's razor say? It would say global pandemic. You are now having governments say that you can't be sued. You're now having, hey, forget those pesky 15-year, 3-4 phase clinical trials. We're just going to steamroll it out. Everyone has to take it. Hey, if we really play our cards right, you'll have to take it if you want to participate in polite society. Okay, so there's one aspect. What's another aspect? Okay, big tech. Well, you got Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, whatever, Twitter. That's a very small amount of CEOs you need to talk to. right? I mean, we saw that back in 2003. James Bamford talks about it in his book, Shadow Factory, the ultra secret post 9/11 NSA. And then he talks about in that book actually going back to something called the Black Chamber, and it was during World War One, and it was going and meeting with the top guys of all like the big telegram companies, and about, hey, we need to be able to read these telegrams. And like you're talking about, the blue pills, the red pills, and then those kind of in the middle, what they did was they obviously kept them separate, and they would go to one and they'd say, hey, just talk to the other four guys. They all say they're on board, patriotic duty. All right, I'll do it. And then you go to the second that you haven't talked to anyone else. Hey, just talk to the other four guys. Just talk to the blah, blah, blah. They're all on board. They all get together. And they're like, well, it's for the patriotic duty, right? So I look at that. I look at collusion, right? So let's just say you had big pharma, only a couple corporations, big tech, only a couple corporations, historical precedent, come all together. And then you don't even need to pull the patriotic duty card. You can pull the global humanity card. Well, man, now I'm starting to look at like, you couldn't convince me that this wouldn't happen just looking at human history, right? So we have all those things. And I think perhaps the most important aspect of it is, like you said, I've been told I have the best Substack. I've been told I have the best podcast. It's also by my mother, who, thinks I'm the most handsome boy in the world, right? So we kind of look at these things. Well, the inverse is 10 out of 10 doctors agree that the vaccine's safe. What about Dr. Malone? Suspended. 10 out of 10 doctors say the vaccine. What about Dr. McCullough? Suspended. 10 out of 10 say it's safe. So when you go to start to look for these things, right, just like you talked about with Malone and Weinstein, was the was VSafe or V, that kind of black box of vaccine records that isn't open like theirs. And the guys, the organization that headed, he said to you, my organization has given out 1 million vaccines. And you said, how many people do you think have died? And he goes, I don't know, 100. CDC said about 100. And at the time, it was 5,000. That's on VAERS, which, as we know, the Lazarus effect from, or not Lazarus effect, the Lazarus study from Harvard says probably as low as 1%. I don't think it's that. It's somewhere in there, way more than 100. So we have all these little puzzle pieces starting to come together. And the biggest one for me is this, and it's what you hit on. It's better when you have them in a group to see each other. I think about the architecture of the Panopticon, the circular prison with the guard tower in the center. You can see every cell. People in their own cells can't see left, right, up, down, and their frontal view is blocked by the guard tower. It's just you in there, right? Now let's imagine they're soundproof. And the guy in the guard tower says, 1 + 1 = what? And you go, 2. And then a little voice comes in and it goes, Mr. Carrigan in cell 6, this is episode 668, cell 668. Just want to let you know you are the only guy that thinks 1 + 1 is 2. Everyone else said it's 3. And you're going, oh, geez. All right, I guess it's 3. But everyone else in every cell is getting Mr. Kirsch in cell 669. Just want you to know, but you're the only one that said it's 2. And you're going, oh, fuck. All right, I guess so. Now, what are we actually in? We're in a pandemic where it was legally mandated that we could not leave. So we have our panopticons. It's a camera. It's a phone. I'm only looking out through there. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, no one else on Facebook's talking about vaccine side effects. I look online and none of the news companies are talking. Surely it would be front page news if 21,725 people were dead, according to VAERS. I'm not seeing it anywhere. Well, I'm going to try to talk about it real quick. Banned. Well, I guess it's for the greater good. You have so many pieces that come together that say this has to be a conspiracy, that it is no longer even remotely rational to think it could be anything other than a conspiracy. I know Dr. Weinstein said emergent phenomena. I don't have that much faith in humanity anymore. I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt that it's emergent phenomena, nor do I think they're stupid. I think they're maliciously competent. Your thoughts on that entire word salad I just threw at you?
Well, there's a lot there. I think that each party has a particular reason. This is kind of like a perfect storm. Okay. It's not like everybody is in on it. Like,
sure.
Bill Gates says, hey, let's it's going to be better if we depopulate
Yeah.
for the entire planet. You'll realize this later, but I'm right. And of course I can't tell you that, but I'll couch it in the, and so there's this vaccine theory that, this is Gates and he's using this
Schwab
to kill a lot of people. Right. And there are other people, like most of the people at the CDC, I've been told actually believe this stuff. They totally believe what they've been told about the vaccine is going to save us. And, and I'm sure most people in mainstream media totally believe that the vaccine is going to save us. And the side effects from the vaccine are nowhere near as bad as the side effects from the disease. And if you say that, you just don't understand the science, because there was this BARDA paper in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that, and this is an Israeli study basically that showed that, oh, you're much better off with the vaccine, even though it has side effects, than COVID. And there are all sorts of issues with that paper. But the point is that people glom on to a belief system that and data that matches what they thought. And they have the trust in the experts, and so they glom on to pieces of fragments that support their belief system, and they'll use that as their defense mechanism to say, no, you're wrong, it was in this paper, and that's my defense. But the reality is that there's so much data that shows that that paper that they're relying on is wrong, but they're just not seeing it because that's the way people are. They're not these machines that logically assimilate data and turn it into logical, rational opinions and beliefs. So I think people are basically doing this because they legitimately believe, using their, thought processes and how they're wired. Fundamentally, I think that, these people in Congress that are saying get the vaccine, they're doing that because they think they've been led to believe that the vaccines are safe and effective, and they've been led to believe that people like me are evil. And for some reason that is not disclosed, all of us people like me and Robert Malone and Peter McCullough and Brett Weinstein and others, Chris Martinson, they believe that we've just gone rogue for some reason, all at the same time. And that we're wrong, that we're just trying to spread mischief. Like, I'm 65 years old. Yeah. Up until 6 months ago, I was a good guy. Now you look at my profile on Wikipedia, and they took away my National Caring Award. I mean, that's how low these people go. So they basically take away anything that you've done good in the past, that you've been a philanthropist, that you have a National Caring Award. Even they took away that I'm suffering from Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, which is an incurable cancer. And I spent millions of dollars to try to find a cure to that. All of those good deeds go away. They just get wiped off of Wikipedia. Instead, you're cast as a conspiracy theorist, spreading misinformation about the safety of the vaccines. I mean, that's Wikipedia. And, of course, one of the founders of Wikipedia is aghast at what's happened to Wikipedia since he created it. He says it's like a runaway train and we can't stop it. And these people have control, and you can't rely on what you read in Wikipedia anymore. And, 6 months ago, I would have said, no, that's not true. It's in the direct objective encyclopedia. But, I even tried to point out, hey, guys, this is not objective. And what they did is they banned me. They said, no, you can't comment anymore. And you're blocked from even communicating to the page editors at Wikipedia, and they said, if you want to complain, you can email this email, which then never responds. And so that's the kind of censorship you're dealing with. And that's just, one example of it. But I mean, hey, I'm 65 years old, and I think I've had my eyes closed for the first 64. So this is eye-opening to me, what happened to me personally, and certainly what has happened to other people, like an innocent 12-year-old who's now a quadriplegic that nobody will talk to. That's unfathomable to me, that not a single mainstream press story has been written about Maddie DeGarry.
It does sort of you almost start to believe in, like, maybe there is evil as like an objective thing. It to me, it starts to look like that. And I mean, with censorship, what you said about that, yeah, Reddit does the same thing. They'll ban you, and then they'll ban you from communicating against hear no evil. And to touch on, and let me clarify, I am with you in that. No, I don't think this is, Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab, twiddling their mustaches and we're doing this, because even those are on the other ends of obscurity, right? When it's Occam's razor. It's, do you really think there's no collusion? Well, no, you'd have to be stupid to think that. Then on the other hand, do you really think they're all together and doing this? No. I mean, for some things like the Manhattan Project, you can but even those even the Rosenbergs, right? And who's the other, Klaus Fuchs, the other guy, stuff does get out. So you have these other ends. If it's not all just emergent, and at the same time, it's not a dark group of guys and, black hoods and the Illuminati doing this. But you have to look at, really, like Steve Kirsch, Robert Malone, they all just, Joe Rogan, RFK, they all just went off the deep end together at the same time.
Bobby Kennedy's been doing this for 20 years.
I know, but even then, him getting kicked off Instagram like a year and a half ago, it's like they all just snapped together. And to me, it's so.
No, Bobby was smarter than the rest of us. He actually wasn't smarter. He was doing a lot of lecturing on the environment and mercury. And he was basically approached by a group of mothers who had autistic children who were damaged by the mercury in vaccines. And he at first ignored them. He said, no, I'm not going to get into this. I'm not going to drag myself into this. And they finally the mothers finally confronted him and dumped a bunch of papers on his doorstep and said, I'm not leaving until you read all these papers. And so he read everything. And that's what convinced him that this was something that he should pay attention to. And so this was not him actually being smart enough to realize what was out there and to change his belief system. This was an external force that basically forced him to confront the reality. And that's how he changed his mind. So, what you look at is what are these changing events that cause people to shift from sort of, where they were in the nice blue pill space to being red pilled, and how were they red pilled? So Kennedy was red pilled by some moms who basically dumped I don't know, it was 18 inches stack high bunch of papers on his doorstep and demanded that he read those papers. So he's confronted. He's put into a situation where he has to confront reality. And I was sort of put into a situation where I had to confront reality, where somebody said, hey, what's your advice on getting the vaccine? I said, oh, it's perfectly safe. And she said, well, 3 of my relatives died, a week after getting the vaccine. If it's perfectly safe, how do you explain that? I said, really? And she said, yeah, they're dead. And, that was that kind of shook me up. And that caused me to make the shift to open my eyes to, oh, maybe what they're telling me isn't true. Right. And I think that, even if you don't have one of those red pill moments like that, it's not a bad idea to verify this stuff first. And it's like if you have high cholesterol, they'll tell you to take a statin. And all of the smart people that I know say don't take the statin. All of the doctors say, oh, take the statin. It's going to, reduce your cholesterol. It's going to be good for you and lower your risk of heart disease. But you see statins have other bad effects that they don't tell you about, that they never looked at. It's kind of like, oh, the thimerosal, the thimerosal, they say, it disappears from your blood in a week, it's gone. It gets excreted out of your body. Nah, not true. It gets excreted out of your blood, and it resides in your brain. It never goes out of your body, that mercury. So, so what people think and what people are told and believe, you need to have a little bit more skeptical eye, like, well, so if it was eliminated from the body, then you should be able to actually see it, in excretions. Yeah. And if you haven't done that, then maybe it didn't, maybe it just got hidden somewhere. And so it trains you to have a more skeptical point of view on stuff that you're told, and, even stuff that's religion on doctors. So I don't trust my doctors anymore when they give me advice on, oh, you should take a statin, Mr. Kirsch, or whatever. It's like, oh, interesting. Thank you for your input. I'll look into that and I'll do the research on it. It's like diabetes drugs, they'll tell you to take these newfangled diabetes drugs that you take, once, it was a Zen, whatever it is. You need to look at the incidence of pancreatitis and these other side effects that they gloss over really effectively, at the end of the commercials, and look at what your options are, because you could be one of those victims of that. And when that happens, it can be quite tragic. It could be, really change your life. And so I've learned to be a lot more skeptical. I'm certainly not perfect by any stretch, but this whole experience has shown me to be much more skeptical about what I'm being told. And I will never trust the FDA, CDC, or NIH ever again, for the rest of my life. This is just crazy.
There's almost like a psychological immune system, or a cognitive immunology, where it's like you can't just take everything spoon-fed, because you lose the ability to think for yourself. I mean, I got a biology degree in college and I loved it. I loved organic chemistry. I loved memorizing everything. It was just something simple about it. There was something philosophically soothing about it. There was a black and white answer. 1 + 1 was 2. And if you got the answer wrong, you could go back and find out why. It was meditative almost.
Yeah.
I also did undergraduate research in aquatic toxicology. The effect, you can still find the paper, the effects of salinity and nickel toxicity to the 2 Eurohaline fish species Cryptolebius marmoratus and Fungilis heteroclitus. Just it's a fancy way of saying we were dropping nickel in these little beakers of fish and watching them die. It was genocide of fish. The point is there was no, biology. You could always go to the professor. You really couldn't figure it out. You could always go to the professor. Same with organic chemistry or whatever. And even if you failed the course, you could always take it again, get a tutor. I mean, you could go back and try again and again and again until you got it figured out. There's something about doing research that, you go to the professor that you're doing it under and you're like, I can't figure out why this is happening with the fish with the magnesium, but it's not happening to the ones with the calcium. And she'd say, yeah, me neither. That's what we're trying to figure out. And it was this sort of like, what do we do? Where do we go? And no one had the answer. And that always kind of opened my eyes to, that was like the next level of learning, was learning how to learn. You could memorize everything. You could, how'd you do good in this class? Well, this is what I did. But then you come onto this new uncharted territory. Where's the map? We don't have a map. We got to figure it out. Well, you start developing map making skills. You go, all right, I see land over there. The ocean looks like it goes forever that way. Let's keep going. Yeah, I don't know. Let's keep going. And you just, that's how you figure. And then you can have these enormous discoveries like, oh, the earth is round. And it shatters everything. But you have to be able to boldly go into areas that you know nothing about. And that's again kind of what this has taught me is like the CDC said this. Well, yeah, up until 6 months ago, I'd be like, well, CDC said it. Yeah, it's the CDC, man. Yeah, listen to them. But now you look at it and you're like, well, what did someone else say? And it starts to peel it back more to where it's not just COVID. You start to look at everything and you go, well, what did they say about Prozac? What did they say about whatever, glucosamine for your joints? And it has this irreversible effect on your brain that you go, I need to start now looking at everything. And there's some beautiful poetic symbolism or some irony in that, like the ARPANET and it turning into the internet and the free flow of information via memes, or even more current viruses and driving variants. Red pilling drives like sort of intellectual variant to where now you're like, you've already lost it. Well, what if they just bring in a new guy instead of Fauci? No. The whole institution's lost it. It's done now. Well, shit. And like, you can't undo it. So there's this thing where it's driving variants of people that want free speech, of people that want to look at things with their own mind. You have a McCullough and a Malone, and all of a sudden you see, Malone getting banned or Fareed getting banned, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? Now, if they successfully kill all the variants, well, then you just have global dictatorship, and that's the end of history. But it doesn't seem to be going that way. You seem to have people like yourself starting to look at things and go, forget about ivermectin. What are they saying about statins now? No. And to me, I guess that's why I'm optimistic, is it seems that it's driving individuals like yourself or like myself to not taking anything at face value anymore. You're going, oh no, I don't agree with this. They edited your Wikipedia. They edited Malone's Wikipedia. I've had on here several times Dr. Ken Albeck, the first deputy director of the Soviet bioweapon program, defected here in 1992. He his youngest daughter has autism. He is pretty sure he's figured out a cure for autism. I've had him on 6 or 7 times. He brings on his patients from like Ukraine and Latvia, and they all come on. They all talk about like, oh yeah, no, he uses these, over-the-counter medications and these therapies. And they talk about, you have a woman going like, I couldn't live a month ago because my child was just nothing was working. And now they're fine. For 10 years, you couldn't give them a hug, and now they're fine. They're fine cuddling you. It starts to break down everything. And if they don't wipe that out, if they don't wipe out that dangerous variant of free thinking and of red pilling, they're gonna lose the whole ball game. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know when that will be. But you have people who, like me or you, 6 months ago, never once like, yeah, but FDA, what are you talking about, you idiot? The FDA said it. Nothing is holy anymore. And that might be what is needed to actually usher in a new paradigm. You might have to pull back the curtains and go, this wasn't just a one case thing. There actually are, demons in sheep clothes. And the more people look at that, it's going to bleed into all aspects of life. And I think it's going to create free thinking people. And it's going, like you said about Steve Jobs, you showed him the optical mouse and he goes, great, get rid of the pad. And you're like, there's a guy that could look at this new thing, instantly analyze it, find the point that was needed to be gone, and get rid of it. That mindset or that capability, probably not as smart as Jobs, but in general, that kind of theme, I think that might be bleeding out into the masses. And I don't know what happens after that? To me, that's an event horizon. I have no idea, but I think we need to keep pushing forward in that direction. I know I've been ranting again, but other thoughts, Mr. Kirsch?
I thought when I first started this, I thought, hey, once I write a paper or somebody writes a paper, that exposes this and collects all the evidence and puts it in front of people. People will read it and say, oh, yep, he's right. All these guys are wrong, and we've been misled. So that was my thinking at the very beginning of this journey. And of course, now I realize that even trying to convince your kids that there's something wrong, even both parents telling the kids that there's something wrong, and the kids don't believe it. They look at, oh, Dad, my friends aren't dying. They've all been vaccinated. And I was on a call just yesterday with a girl, and her mom told the daughter, do not get vaccinated. This thing is not as safe. And the daughter said, yes, mom, yes, mom. And the daughter secretly got vaccinated without her mother's knowledge. A week later, she's disabled. And, she thought she was smarter than her mom. Her friends weren't getting injured. So this is a person who was a trainer in a gym, so she's in phenomenal shape. And she now, can't walk. She can walk, but not very far. And it's just devastated her life. And not only that, she's been to 25 doctors, and not a single one realized that it was caused by the vaccine. 25 doctors, even after she says, hey, I think it's caused by the vaccine. No, it's in your head. The tests show there's nothing wrong with you. It's all in your head. Now, she's got a resting pulse rate of 60. Her pulse goes up to 180 for no reason at times. That is not anxiety. But again, nobody in the medical community believes her that she's vaccine injured. So, or the 25 people, the only one was a chiropractor who had just seen another vaccine injured case and said, maybe it was the vaccine. It's going to take a while for people to wake up and realize that what people like me have been saying is true. And, unfortunately, it has to happen one at a time, and people get moved over. And people in the medical community are like super hard to move over, because if you speak out against the vaccine or against masking or whatever, your job is terminated. They don't want to lose their grants from the NIH. So you're silenced, or you're fired. Or whatever they do to you if you speak out against it, because the institution doesn't want to lose the money that they get, so they don't want to go against the quote establishment. And also, you'll lose your license. You'll lose your license to practice medicine for the rest of your life. And so, these people who are speaking out are jeopardizing their job. So it's going to take a while for this to happen. I don't know how long I'm heartened that Joe Rogan, who has an audience that's 50 times bigger than CNN, that the Malone episode here is what is, I think Malone could be classified as one of the world's largest misinformation spreaders. And yet, the guy who has the biggest podcast, this is the number one episode of all time for Joe Rogan, was his interview with Robert Malone. So people are hungry for the truth. They're not getting it from the mainstream media. They're getting it from alternate media. And this is why CNN's numbers are going way down, because they're not telling people the truth. And people are starting to get wise. It's taken a while.
I mean, I can speak from that on even my tiny podcast. You have on, a guy that walked on the moon, or you have on a B-2 Spirit pilot, and, it gets some views. You have on Dr. Fareed, and it gets 100x. It's what people want. Malone is the most listened episode on the most listened podcast, recently surpassing what was the most episode, Dr. McCullough, the most listened episode. So you have these things, and I know we gotta wrap this up in a minute.
Yeah. I got another
Yeah.
Zoom I got to be on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but there is something beautiful, and it's what you're doing right now, and it's that, you know, $1 million if you can prove the NIH right or prove the NIH wrong. It's we can do this. We can do the whole.
Oh no, and anyone can prove them wrong. That's easy. Proving that they got the right answer.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you the
point is sorry. Point is though,
no problem.
Is there's this thing where all of a sudden it's, well, let's speak the language that everyone speaks. You can show them the data, and the cognitive dissonance says you're wrong, you're misinformation, you're a Nazi. Well, everybody speaks greenbacks, and you're going, all right, here it is, and no one's touching it. And to me, that says everything.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm offering $1 million for anybody who shows my my analysis is wrong, and so
yeah. And that's the language everyone speaks, and no one's touching it. But I know I got to let you run. I know you got another one. Mr. Steve Kirsch, thank you so much, sir. I will email you when this is up. I'll put all the links to your Substack, Gab, blah, 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 all in the description.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. God bless, and thank you for your time, man.